Ferdinand II in the 30 Years' War, and he does so well that Ferdinand gets paranoid and, I guess, jealous and hires Wallenstein instead. Albrecht of Wallenstein. Okay, we'll get to Wallenstein later. Henry VIII, a powerful, effective king of England, married Catherine of Aragon, who you could also, if you wanted to, put on your list, but married Catherine of Aragon, Spanish princess. They were married for 18 years, but only one child survived, and Henry was pretty sure it wasn't his fault because he got around. But only a legitimate child can inherit, okay? Only a child produced from the married parents can inherit a throne. So even if he's fathered illegitimate sons elsewhere, they can't ever inherit anything. And so he wants a son. He has one daughter, Mary. That's the only surviving child. And that displeases him. Sorry, that's I'm going to throw some. These aren't on the test, but it's interesting.
What the? Brian and Jacob, you guys have to let go.
You guys are all tied to Henry VIII, and they're all named Thomas. It's hilarious.
So,
that's funny. Okay? You know Thomas More already. So Henry applied what a king would generally do if they want to get out of a marriage, because there's no divorce in the Catholic Church, is they ask for an annulment from the Pope. And because they're a king and they're powerful, the Pope is almost always going to say yes because the king can give them a bunch of money or something. And so, and it would be a favor, here, okay, if you give me the annulment, what do you want? I'll help you out. So Henry asks the Pope for an annulment, and the Pope says no. Which is unexpected, but the reason the Pope says no, this is in your book, okay? Henry's wife, Catherine of Aragon, is the aunt of the most powerful man in the world, Charles V. And so the Pope doesn't want to piss off Charles V, so the Pope's like, sorry, Henry, no annulment for you. And so Henry's not real happy about it, and so one of the Thomases, I think it was this one, Cromwell, comes up with a plan. Hey, Henry, start your own church. You start your own church, you can get a divorce. And Henry thought that was a great idea. He loves the Catholic Church. When Luther first wrote, Henry wrote this scathing condemnation of Luther. And the Pope loved it. The Pope called him the defender of the faith, gave him the title, defender of the faith, because he had defended Catholicism against Luther. But Henry has a problem, and he wants a son, and Pope wants to help him, so he creates his own church. In creating his own church, though, Sir Thomas More, his best friend and Prime Minister, is like, you can't do this. This is a stupid thing to do. Don't do this. So Henry had him executed. There's a great film about Sir Thomas More called Man for All Seasons. It's really, really good. So he creates his own church. He's the head of it. He doesn't want to run it, though. He just is head of the church and he wants the divorce. And the English Protestant church is going to be an awful lot like Catholicism at the beginning, because Henry really likes Catholicism. So it's barely Protestant in practice. If you went to a Church of England service at the beginning, it's going to seem like a Catholic service because it's not very different. Thomas Cranmer was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's the one who runs the church. He's not the Pope, but he is the top-ranking churchman in England, and he's the one who runs the church. Officially, Henry's in charge, and he runs it. The Church of England is created by Parliament and the Act of Supremacy. Okay, that officially makes Henry king, the head of all kings, it happens to be Henry, head of the English church. Okay, so Act of Supremacy creates the church. That's Cromwell's idea. Cranmer is the one who's going to run it from day to day. Sir Thomas More gets executed because he thinks that's a horrible idea. Okay? But he gets his divorce, and so he marries his primary mistress, Anne Boleyn, who may have already been pregnant with Elizabeth, he's of course hoping it's a boy. When it turns out to be a girl, Elizabeth, he's not very happy. And she does some stuff, and so he has her executed. Catherine left. Catherine and Mary went to Spain, where she's from. They were fine. She probably wasn't happy, but they were fine. She marries again, Jane Seymour, and she finally conceives a boy. Jane will die in childbirth, however, and then He marries 3 more times. None of them have any kids. The last one's still living when he dies. There is a BBC miniseries, The 6 Lives of Henry VIII. It's supposed to be good. So, he's fun. Because Edward's a boy, Edward gets the throne first. He's a child when he takes over. He lives about 6 years as king. He never rules in his own right. He was never healthy. He dies. Really, you don't need Edward's not fast. The only major thing that happens, really, okay, because adults are making his decisions, because he's a child, okay? The leaders make the Church of England more Protestant when Edward is king, because Henry's dead now, so they can do that. They want to move in an important Protestant direction, so the Church of England is Protestant. It's still hierarchical, which is similar to Catholicism. It still has some ritual, so it's not nearly as Protestant as other Protestant churches, but it is Protestant. Okay, so that's the English Reformation in a nutshell, at least the first part of it. Then Edward dies, of course, and Mary becomes queen. Yeah, and she's a Catholic, and so she re-Catholicizes, shuts down the Church of England, brings Pope back, marries Philip II, kills a bunch of Protestants, earning her nickname Bloody Mary, and then dies. She was queen for about 5 years. So then when her much younger sister Elizabeth becomes queen, Elizabeth again Protestantizes England, brings Church of England back. Parliament has to pass a new Act of Supremacy. 39 articles is not in your book, I think, but the 39 articles is the document that really reestablishes the Church of England after the Act of Supremacy is passed again. And that lays out how the church is going to function. And your book does talk about the 39 articles, it just doesn't use that name. Your book says that it's kind of a middle ground. It's still not as Protestant as many of the other Protestants on the continent, but it's not Catholic either. It's kind of a middle ground between the Catholic and what most Protestants were. So that's Church of England under Elizabeth. Elizabeth, of course, great queen, rules for a long, long time until well into her old age, never marries, never has children, but that's a golden age for England. Religiously, though, becomes Protestant. Elizabeth, though, also was very pragmatic about it. Okay? Church of England is the official church. Okay? You can't openly worship anything else. But you know what? She doesn't persecute Puritans, the people who think Church of England is not Protestant enough. And she doesn't persecute Catholics. As long as you don't mess with her, as long as you don't cause problems, you can be a Catholic and be in England. You can be a Puritan and be in England. She sounds like what? Okay. There's a more important term you might associate with her. Not that. There you go. That's the one. Okay. Practical decisions for the good of her country that are not necessarily on strictly religious lines. Okay? So, we got through everybody except Mary Queen of Scots in the England part. Mary Queen of Scots was Elizabeth's cousin. She gets pushed out of Scotland. She goes to France for a while. And then, of course, she shows up in England and then tries to kill Elizabeth. Not really, but she was involved in plots. She was involved in plots. She wasn't going to be the one who did it. But she was helping to try to get Elizabeth killed. And that's ultimately what cost her own life. And so after she gets kicked out of Scotland, and we'll see this in the next unit, her son became King of Scotland. He will also inherit England after Elizabeth dies. But you don't need to know, his name's James, but you don't need to know him until the next unit. So Mary Queen of Scots dies. No, this is Mary Tudor. Mary Queen of Scots is a Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, care. But again, you don't really need that so much. Okay, this is Mary Tudor. Okay. Charles the Fifth. Man, he owns everything. Spain, all Spanish colonies, Netherlands, much of southern Italy, Austria, Hungary, Transylvania, Romania, Holy Roman Emperor. He owns a ton of stuff. Okay? And he inherits all of that pretty much just by being born. And it's just his grandparents were from all these different areas, and they just inherited to him. So, really, really powerful. And he, of course, has become emperor right at this critical time when Luther starts writing and publishing. And so he's a devout Catholic. He wants the empire to stay all Catholic. And he will devote his life to trying to achieve that, and he will fail. That's that. And so Okay, the religious wars that you need to know that are all at the end, okay, those are after Charles retires. But there are religious wars Charles is fighting. Charles is fighting against Protestants in the empire regularly. Okay, but the wars are in Switzerland and in the empire. Okay? But he can't defeat the Protestants repeatedly. He can't force the whole country to be, the whole area to be Catholic again, what he wants to do. So he gets tired and gives up. He retires. But before he retires to end the wars, Peace of Augsburg, 1555. You have to know Peace of Augsburg. I've already talked about it in class 1. Peace of Augsburg, 1555 is in your book. You have to know it. Okay, first of all, it ends the religious war Peace is fighting. But it's also a compromise with the Protestants. And this is what creates the policy in the empire. Remember, there are over 300 individual political entities in the empire. From little tiny pieces of land or free cities to big, huge duchies and elector states. Okay, we call all the people in charge of that, we just say German princes. That's just a generalization. German princes. Each prince, no matter how big or small their piece of land is, they choose Lutheranism or Catholicism, and everyone's supposed to follow that. That's the Peace of Augsburg. It stops the fighting, and it also allows religious choice. Okay? It's not really religious toleration, it's religious choice. But it does mean the empire now is going to have some Lutherans and some Catholics. And, it's not what Charles wanted, but it ends the fight. And then he splits his empire in two, gives the western half to his son Philip II, and the eastern half to his younger brother Ferdinand I. So Philip II becomes the new king of Spain, Ferdinand I becomes the new Holy Roman Emperor. Okay. So, Philip II, very powerful. King of Spain, also very Catholic. Yeah, Philip II is the one who was married to Mary Tudor. Although, as far as we know, they never really were in love. It seems to be that they both were Catholic and wanted Catholicism to be everywhere. And then he later proposed to Elizabeth, and she's not interested at all. Philip is involved in two religious wars. He is the one who sends the Spanish Armada to try to invade England. And then he's also the one who's king in the Dutch Revolt. But he also was very successful in fighting the Ottoman Turks, especially in the Mediterranean. It was a great naval victory for Philip at the Battle of Lepanto, which kind of shuts down the Ottoman navy for kind of ever. And so he, like his dad, is spending, because Charles V was also fighting the Ottoman Turks. And so that took up some of his resources as well. So he's fighting Protestants, he's fighting the Turks, he's also trying to deal with all the colonies. He's got a lot on his plate. Philip, though, lives in Spain, and he's also king of the Netherlands, and the Dutch don't really like having him as their king. He never even went to visit this other kingdom. He lived in Spain his whole life. They, of course, some of them are becoming Protestant, but all of them would rather be independent from Spain. Even the Catholic ones would really rather be independent. He, of course, sends the Duke of Alva after the iconoclasm starts, and the Dutch are trying to be more independent, and he wants the Duke of Alva to deal with that. We don't know how ruthless Philip said to be. We really don't. The Duke could have done a lot of it on his own, but he's very ruthless. So that's, of course, so he's going to lose half of the Netherlands in the revolt as the northern half becomes independent. The southern half will stay loyal to him as the Spanish Netherlands, eventually the Austrian Netherlands, and then today it's Belgium. But he loses the northern half of the Netherlands. And, of course, he loses the Armada. That did never work. English ships were more maneuverable, they could fire more quickly, more often, and the English captains did a better job of fighting that, plus the weather really helped the English. Ferdinand I, Holy Roman Emperor after his brother. He's not as important as Ferdinand II in our class. I did one of my longest papers in college on Ferdinand I, and you don't care about any of it. You don't need to know. Ignatius Loyola, one of the most important people in the Catholic Reformation, the founder of the Jesuits. He was a former soldier. He wanted the Jesuits to be soldiers of God. They took vows of poverty, meaning they refused to own anything. All churchmen really don't have private property, but many churchmen really enjoy how they live. Loyola and the Jesuits not so much. They really live a very, very on purpose poor lifestyle. Even the Pope, current Pope, is the only Jesuit Pope ever, and when he showed up in the Vatican apartments and saw how rich they pointed there were, he's like, I can't live here. I need something simpler. And so he took smaller, less fancy apartments to live in because it was too much. And that goes back to his Jesuit root. Loyola, of course, one of the groups presented about that, the spiritual exercises. There was some stuff in your book about him. There's a good primary source in the spiritual exercises as it talks about what the purpose is and what he wants the Jesuits to accomplish. Again, mostly education and missionary work. Some of the people in the empire will be reconverted back to Catholicism because of the work of Jesuits. They are very good at what they do. They're very highly educated, and they're very good in doing both the missionary work and the education work. Paul III was the most important pope of this time period because he's the one who not only approved the Jesuits, he's the one who gave the Jesuits the right to exist. He's also the one who calls the Council of Trent. Okay? Trent is also a really, really important part of the Catholic Reformation because they cleaned up their church. They met for 18 years. Okay? Paul was dead by the time the council was done because they often choose older guys, and so he just didn't live that long. But he's the one who got started, but he also appointed really good people to the College of Cardinals. When there's an opening for a new cardinal, it is the Pope who chooses who that is. And he chose scholars and devout churchmen who were going to continue his reforms after he was dead. And so the Catholic Church is in a much better place. At the Council of Trent, they reassure all their doctrines, all 7 sacraments, good works and faith. Everything they had said doctrinally before, they reinforce yes. They don't address any of the Protestant issues. But they do clean up their church. Indulgences are going to be scaled way back and much more controlled. They're going to almost completely get rid of absenteeism, pluralism, and simony. And they're also going to do a really good job of now instituting educational practices so that parish priests will all be educated. They'll all know their Latin well enough to give the Mass. They'll be able to read the Bible and interpret it, or at least give the church's interpretation. So Council of Trent is a hugely important piece of work in reforming the church. Many Catholics will come back to Catholicism once the church has been reformed. Because they liked Catholicism, but they just were unhappy with the reforms. In addition to Jesuits and Council of Trent, the Catholic Reformation also features the Inquisition to go after heretics and the Index of Prohibited Books, in which they said, you can't read any of don't read any of this stuff. Every Protestant author gets on there. Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, they're all on there. Even Erasmus is on the index. Its full name is Index of Prohibited Books, but it's also just called the Index. And that also helps the Catholics try to keep some of their people from reading Protestant works. Some people are still going to read them, because we're humans. And some humans, as soon as we're told you can't do something, then the first thing we do is we go do that. So some people would be curious, like, oh, what am I not supposed to read? Oh, well, let's read that. But many of them are going to stay loyal anyway. St. Teresa of Avila and her mysticism, and she cleans up the Carmelite order. She's also going to be an important part of the Catholic Reformation. Your book talked about it, and I talked about it in class. Know the difference between the terms Catholic Reformation and Counter-Reformation. One of the group 5 on Friday presented about that as well. Counter-Reformation suggests that the only reason this happened is because the Protestants first did theirs and they were panicking, which may have been partially true. But the idea of the Catholic Reformation is the idea it would have happened anyway eventually. Maybe later, but it would have happened anyway eventually. I think there's some good reasoning for using both terms. William Simon of Orange, in the Dutch Revolt, he becomes the leader of the Dutch. He's from the House of Orange, most important family. And he becomes the leader of initially pacification against all of the people of the Netherlands. But then, again, the southern, mostly Catholic ones will decide to stay loyal. But the north that he leads, he's from Holland, and one of the 7 northern provinces. They'll be successful. Duke of Alva, of course, is the big meanie. The person, he goes through and he kills thousands and thousands of Dutch people. He creates the Council of Blood. As he tries to force them to stay both Spanish and to stay Catholic. It's not going to go well for him because his tactics are only going to make the Dutch even more upset. Margaret of Parma is not in your book. She was Philip's sister, and she was his regent in the Netherlands. And she was kind of more tolerant. Remember how the Dutch were tolerant of each other? The Catholics didn't care about the Protestants. Protestants didn't care about the Catholics. She was one of the reasons for that. When the Duke of Alva shows up, she leaves the picture. So she's not in your book. She's not on my test. But just as a name, if you ever see Margaret of Parma, oh, maybe you'll remember that's who it is. All right, all the Henrys. Okay, so this is French Civil War, or sorry, the French Wars of Religion, which turned into the French Civil War. So Henry II dies in an accident, and that really starts the Wars of Religion because now there's uncertainty in the monarchy, plus there's all this, religion changing going on. Henry III is his last son. The first two don't matter as much. Henry III is his last son. He will, of course, his mother's Catherine de Medici, Henry II's wife. He starts the War of the Three Henrys to go after the Guise faction that was hardcore Catholic. He has Henry of Guise assassinated, and then a monk gets really, really mad at Henry III and assassinates Henry III. And that leaves Henry IV, who was a Huguenot, French Catholic, French Protestant. Okay? And Henry IV becomes the new King of France, and he decides, I will convert to Catholicism. Most of my people are Catholic. I will convert so that I rule, so that it's easier for me to be king. Okay? Again, you should already know what that term makes him. Okay? Or what the term is that we can now call him because of that. But he also creates the Edict of Nantes. You have to know Edict of Nantes. The Edict of Nantes grants religious toleration to Huguenots in France. Okay? Henry IV, through the Edict of Nantes. That creates religious toleration for Huguenots in France. He becomes Catholic, of course, but Huguenots are now tolerated. Okay, Louis XIII and Richelieu are really more in the next unit, but they do play a role in this unit. Louis XIII is Henry IV's son. He becomes King of France after, but he really doesn't want to become king. I mean, he wants to be king. He doesn't want to do the work. Okay, whereas Dad did lots of work, and his successor will do lots of work. So Louis found somebody who could run the kingdom for him, Cardinal Richelieu. Richelieu is a Catholic cardinal. Richelieu is the one that makes the decision to involve the French in the 30 Years' War. Okay. Now, both of these names they're not on my test this time. They're on the next unit, but they do play a part in the 30 Years' War. Remember that when I made you read about the 30 Years' War, you had to go in chapter 15 to get it? Okay? Because this book puts that religious war in the next chapter. I like keeping all the religious wars together. So they're really going to be in the next text, but I want you to just get them into your brain so you're aware of who they are. Ferdinand II is the Holy Roman Emperor who really kind of starts the 30 Years' War. He gets elected King of Bohemia. He takes away the toleration that existed there. So Protestants in Bohemia throw Ferdinand's regents out the window. And the defenestration of Prague begins the 30 Years' War. The first two stages are totally Catholic. He keeps winning and winning and winning because his first general Maximilian is awesome. And even after he fires Max and hires Wallenstein, Wallenstein is awesome. So they keep winning and winning and winning. You get the Edict of Restitution. And so at the halfway point of the 30 Years' War, things look really, really good for the Catholics. Okay? It's like they're doing awesome. And they are. But the war's not over. Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden, a devout Lutheran, comes into the third stage of the war, and he's going to change things up. He brings more Protestant support. Again, he has French money helping him, but he is a warrior king and a brilliant general, and they will win decisively two key battles against the Catholics and start to swing the war more towards the Protestants. And eventually the 30 Years' War will end. Treaty of Westphalia. You must know Treaty of Westphalia, 1648, ending the 30 Years' War. Switzerland is given independence. The Netherlands is officially acknowledged. It's been independent since 1609, but it's officially acknowledged by other countries. It, of course, stops the war. Question? It stops, the fighting is now over in the 30 Years' War. It also reinforces the overall weakness of the empire because each of those German princes still retains all their power, and now they get to choose Calvinism. So now there are three religious choices in the empire. You can be, if your prince chooses Calvinism, then everybody's supposed to be Calvinist. If your prince chooses Lutheranism, everybody's supposed to be Lutheran, Catholic, Catholic.
Wait, choosing all?
Who's that one guy that got him? That he got a.
Oh,
Like he got removed from
well,
the church, right? 'Cause, like,
the Dutch, the Netherlands. The Netherlands is officially recognized by other countries as independent in 1648, but they've really been independent since 1609 when the Dutch War stopped. Okay? The Netherlands in 1648 are officially recognized as an independent nation state, but they were really independent in 1609. So you need to know Peace of Westphalia as well, because it's a critical turning point as far as ending. Tetzel, of course, is the indulgence seller that gets it all started. Martin Luther heard him speak, totally disagreed with him, so Martin Luther wrote the 95 Theses, which launched the whole thing. Right. Groups of people, Jesuits or Society of Jesus, Catholic priests who led by Loyola initially, later Francis Xavier, and they will really have a huge role to play in the Catholic Reformation. Huguenots, French Calvinists, got another politiques. Initially French Catholics who support and work with Protestants because they hate the violence. Later we see this term applied to both Elizabeth and Henry IV, first Henry IV. Groups of people you should know. Okay, now I'm going to run through some of these things I will have already talked about, some of them maybe not. Okay. So 95 Theses we talked about, Transubstantiation, Consubstantiation we talked about, Peace of Augsburg, gotta know that. Acts of Supremacy, creates the Church of England. Trent, we talked about Trent. The Jesuits, talked about them. Index, talked about that. Inquisition, yes. Catholic Reformation, Defenestration. Spanish Armada, the huge fleet that fails. St. Bartholomew's Day. That didn't come up. That's in the French Wars of Religion. As the French Wars of Religion become the French Civil War, St. Bartholomew's Day massacre planned by the Guise family and helped, Catherine de' Medici helped it happen. That's when they tried to assassinate all the important Huguenots at Henry of Navarre's supposed wedding or planned wedding. They did kill a whole bunch of them, and that really launches the last part of the French Wars of Religion, which we call the French Civil War. Yves Dumas, yes. Westphalia, yes. Destination by Faith, Predestination, the Great Schism. Yes. 39 articles I mentioned, Politiques, yes.
Inspired Luther to write the 95 Theses.
All the religious wars, yes. Alright. Questions? You have 3 minutes. 39 articles. When Elizabeth re-Protestantizes and recreates the Church of England, well, technically Parliament recreates it with the Second Act of Supremacy, making Elizabeth the head of the English Church and relaunching the Church of England.
It's like I accidentally
39 articles get created by Parliament and Elizabeth to be the rules for the new Church of England. Kind of a middle ground between all the